In my hometown, where my parents grew up, there's an old custom. When a girl is born, she's gifted an ikamatsu doll, a traditional Japanese doll dressed in a kimono, known for its delicate features and lifelike appearance. For boys, they receive a samurai doll, complete with armor and a stern expression. When I was little, I adored the ikamatsu doll I got at birth. I play with it, dress it up, and talk to it like a friend. But as I grew older and started elementary school, my feelings changed. I didn't grow tired of the doll, not exactly. I became afraid of it. The reason was simple, almost childish, but it felt real to me. Several times, I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my room pitch black, and there it was, the doll's pale face glowing faintly in the darkness. It startled me every time. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, its glassy eyes tracking my every move. The doll's presence in my room filled me with dread, a creeping fear I couldn't explain. By the time I was in 3rd grade, I couldn't stand it anymore. I begged my mother to move the doll somewhere else. She agreed, and we placed it in the guest room on the 2nd floor, a room at the far end of the house. That room was rarely used, mostly for storing books and odds and ends we didn't need often. I avoided it like the plague. One day, though, I found myself home alone. The rest of my family had gone out, leaving me to watch the house. I was bored out of my mind. The TV was playing nothing but dull shows, and I wanted to make the most of having the house to myself. So I decided to venture up to the guest room to grab some books to read. The only problem, to get to the bookshelf, I'd have to pass right by the doll. Even though it was just a doll and one I'd once loved, something about it still unnerved me. As I climbed the stairs, the sky outside darkened and rain began to fall, pattering against the windows. To psych myself up, I told myself, just act normal. Open the door, walk in, grab a book, and get out. No big deal. I reached the door, my hand gripping the doorknob. My heart raced as I thought about the doll inside. I hadn't seen it in ages, but I knew exactly where it was, perched on a cabinet near the door, like a gatekeeper facing the entrance. I took a deep breath, mustering all my courage, and cracked the door open just enough to peek inside. To my surprise, the doll's face wasn't turned toward the door as I'd expected. Instead, it was angled toward the right corner of the room, its back and side profile visible. I let out a shaky breath, relieved. Okay, I thought, as long as I don't have to meet its gaze, I'll be fine. I gave myself a little pep talk and prepared to step inside. Just then, a deafening clap of thunder roared outside. My courage vanished in an instant. Nope, I was done. I bolted back to the staircase, my heart pounding. That thunder scared the life out of me. I muttered, trying to calm down. But after a few minutes, for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt a spark of determination return. This time I've got this, I told myself. I changed my strategy. I'd march up to the door, fling it open in one swift motion, and charge in before fear could stop me. I steeled myself and strode back to the room. Gripping the doorknob, I threw the door wide open. The moment I did, I froze. The doll was still on the cabinet, but now it was facing a different direction. Its head was turned toward the left corner of the room, near the bookshelf. My mind reeled. Wait, wasn't it facing the right side just a moment ago? How could it have moved? A chill ran down my spine. As I stood there, grappling with confusion and fear, a strange noise came from the corner the doll was facing, a faint, unsettling sound, like something shifting or scratching. I screamed, pure panic taking over. Without a second thought, I turned and sprinted downstairs to the living room. I fumbled for the TV remote and switched it on, flipping to a comedy show to drown out my terror. I grabbed a blanket from the couch and burrowed beneath it, my heart still racing. As I huddled there, I heard a loud bang from upstairs, like a door slamming shut. Then came the sound of something heavy falling and rolling across the floor. The noises stopped after a moment, but I was too terrified to move. I stayed curled up under the blanket, barely breathing for what felt like an eternity, probably about half an hour, until I heard the front door open. My family was back. Relief washed over me. I was saved. But then my older sister went upstairs. Moments later, a piercing scream echoed through the house. My parents and I rushed up to see what was wrong. We found her standing outside the guest room, pointing inside, her face pale. "What is that?" she stammered. We crowded around the doorway and looked in. There, in the middle of the room, lay the Ikamatsu doll, sprawled on the floor. Wrapped around, it was a snake, its body coiled tightly, tangled in the doll's hair. The two seemed locked together, as if struggling, unable to break free. The sight was surreal, like something out of a nightmare. My father called someone to remove the snake, and the doll was cleaned and placed back on the cabinet by the door. The incident was over, or so it seemed. Years later, as an adult, I thought back on that day. I learned the snake was venomous, a dangerous intruder that had somehow made its way into our second-floor guest room. How it got there, I'll never know. But I couldn't help wondering, was the doll watching the snake, tracking its movements? Was it trying to protect me? If I hadn't noticed the snake in that corner, if I'd walked into the room unaware, would I have been bitten? The thought sent a shiver through me. That doll, which had once terrified me, might have saved my life. Among my elementary school classmates, there were two boys everyone considered troublemakers. Let's call them Nishikawa and Sugita. Nishikawa was the leader of a little gang of delinquents, always stirring up trouble, while Sugita was his loyal sidekick, following him like a shadow. Since our houses were close by, I'd known them since we were kids, so I never thought of them as dangerous. To me, they were just Nishikawa and Sugita, the neighborhood boys. But to others who didn't know them, they were like demons, bad news wherever they went. From elementary school, the two of them were always up to no good together. They'd steal from local shops, causing some stores to lose so much money they had to close. By the time we reached middle school, they'd escalated to joining a Bosuzoka gang, a group of young motorbike riders known in Japan for their reckless, rebellious behavior, often speeding through streets and causing chaos. They were the textbook definition of small-time punks. But until our third year of middle school, they were kept in check at school by older students, so they didn't cause much trouble there. Then, just before summer break, as we were about to enter our final year, something happened. Word spread that an old, abandoned house near my neighborhood was slated for demolition. The place was a crumbling relic, deserted for decades, its windows boarded up and walls overgrown with vines. Nishikawa, Sugita, and a few of their delinquent buddies decided to sneak into the house before it was torn down, hoping to find something valuable to steal and sell. I was a part of their crew, but since I lived nearby and they'd known me forever, they showed up at my house that day and pressured me to come along as their lookout. I didn't want to do it. Breaking into an abandoned house sounded like a terrible idea, but I was scared. If I refused, they might make my life miserable at school, picking fights or worse. Reluctantly, I gave in. That evening, we slipped into the abandoned house. The air inside was musty, and the floorboards creaked under our steps. Though no one had lived there for years, furniture was still scattered around, dusty tables, chairs, and cabinets, all left to rot. But anything obviously valuable had long been cleared out. I kept thinking, these idiots are wasting their time. I just want to go home and study for exams. As I stood there, itching to leave, Sugita's voice cut through the silence. "This has got to be worth a fortune," he shouted. Curious, we gathered around him. In his hands was a large, old-fashioned female doll, the kind you might see in a museum. It looked ancient, its kimono faded and frayed, and its face was cracked, giving it an eerie, unsettling appearance. Nishikawa and Sugita were thrilled. "This must be an antique from the Edo period," they exclaimed, their eyes gleaming with greed. I thought they were delusional. There was no way this creepy doll was some priceless treasure. But before I could say anything, the doll's head snapped off without warning, as if yanked by an invisible force. It flew upward, then hit the ground and rolled a few times. We all jumped back, startled. Sugita, still holding the now headless doll, panicked and flung it to the floor. A cold dread washed over me, my skin prickling. "We should put it back," I said, my voice shaky. "This feels unlucky." Nishikawa just laughed. "Don't be such a coward," he mocked. Sugita, regaining his composure, glared at the doll on the ground. "Damn thing scared the hell out of me," he spat. "This piece of junk pissed me off." Let's burn it. Nishikawa grinned and turned to the others. What do you say, guys? Should we torch it? The rest of their crew, like brainless minions from some anime, cheered in agreement. Burn it. Burn it, they chanted. I tried to protest. Come on, that's a bad idea. Just put it back where we found it. But Nishikawa ignored me, his mind made up. He picked up the doll, pulled a lighter from his pocket, and flicked it on. I couldn't believe how insane they were acting. The doll's cracked face and tattered kimono already gave me the creeps, and now they wanted to set it on fire? I started edging toward the exit, my instinct screaming to get out. Nishikawa held the flame to the doll, and it caught fire instantly, the old fabric blazing up. But at the same moment, something went horribly wrong. Sugita's clothes suddenly erupted in flames. The fire spread terrifyingly fast, engulfing him in seconds. Everyone froze, too shocked to react. As I turned to run, Sugita, now a human fireball, screamed and flailed, then lunged at Nishikawa, wrapping his arms around him. Nishikawa's clothes caught fire too, and the two of them stumbled out into the yard, screaming and burning. Their so-called friends didn't hesitate. They bolted, shouting and scrambling out of the house, abandoning Nishikawa and Sugita. I stood there, torn between running and helping. In the end, I couldn't just leave them. I spotted a pond in the yard, its water filthy but usable. Grabbing a rusty bucket nearby, I scooped up the murky water and raced to where Nishikawa and Sugita were writhing on the ground. I doused them with bucket after bucket until the flames finally died out. Exhausted and gasping, they collapsed, their skins scorched and raw. Panting, I glanced back at the house. What about the doll? I crept back inside, my heart pounding. The doll lay on the floor, its fire mysteriously extinguished. I couldn't understand how the flames had gone out on their own, but I wasn't taking chances. Muttering apologies under my breath, I picked it up, careful not to touch the charred parts, and carried it to the kitchen. There, I placed it in the sink, hoping that would somehow contain whatever bad energy it held. Then I hopped on my bike and sped home. Once I got there, I called Nishikawa and Sugita's parents, explaining what had happened. Terrified that their son's crimes would get them in trouble with the police or fire department, they didn't call for help. Instead, they rushed to the scene, bundled the boys into a taxi, and took them to the hospital. The next day, Nishikawa and Sugita were absent from school, and they stayed out for the rest of the summer. During that time, the abandoned house was demolished, reduced to a flat, empty lot. When school started again after the break, Nishikawa and Sugita returned, but they were shadows of their former selves. Nishikawa's face was scarred on the left side, the burn still red and unhealed, and he moved like he was in constant pain. Sugita's hair was gone, his scalp a patchwork of burn marks. Their delinquent gang fell apart, their reputation shattered. From that point on, their lives spiraled downward. Sugita, struggling with his injuries, enrolled in beauty school after middle school, but couldn't handle scissors properly due to his condition. Depressed and defeated, he vanished at 17, leaving no trace. Nishikawa became a low-life thug, got caught selling drugs, and died in prison at 21. I don't know if their downfall was tied to that doll, but it's hard not to think so. Their lives took a sharp turn for the worse the moment they set it on fire. To me, it felt like the doll had punished them. Ever since witnessing their tragic fates, I believed you can't treat dolls carelessly. Even now, when I pass by shops selling dolls, I can't bring myself to look at them directly, my old fears still lingering. Back when I was in elementary school, there was a small hill behind our school with a well-known local shrine tucked into the trees. It was a quiet, sacred place where people came to pray, leave offerings, or seek blessings, a common sight in Japan. After school, my friends and I would often head there to play hide-and-seek among the stone lanterns and cedar trees. One day, we stayed later than usual, playing until dusk settled over the hill, casting long shadows across the shrine grounds. As the game wrapped up, we gathered in the open area near the shrine's main hall, laughing and catching our breath. That's when we noticed something odd. Next to the shrine's offering box, where visitors tossed coins as a gesture of respect, sat an old, weathered girl doll. It was small, dressed in a faded kimono, its porcelain face pale and slightly chipped. To us, it looked out of place, almost as if it had appeared out of nowhere. In Japan, dolls are sometimes left at shrines for ritual purification or to honor spirits, but to a group of kids, it just seemed creepy. One of my friends whispered, "That thing looks spooky." Everyone nodded, murmuring about how eerie it was to find a doll sitting there in the fading light. I was a bit of a show-off back then, always eager to prove I was braver than the rest. So to impress my friends, I decided to show them I wasn't scared. I picked up a small stone from the ground, took aim, and threw it at the doll. The stone hit with a loud clunk, striking the doll square in the face. To our shock, the doll's face didn't just crack. It collapsed inward, as if sucked into a void. The porcelain shattered, leaving a dark, gaping hole where its face should have been. The sight was horrifying, like the doll had been hollowed out, its empty head now a black pit. We all froze, too stunned to speak. The air around us felt heavy, unnatural. Then, in unison, we screamed, scattering in every direction, running home as fast as our legs could carry us. By the time I got home, I was still shaken, but I was just a kid. Things like that slip your mind quickly. That night, I went through my usual routine, watching TV, eating dinner, and brushing off the day's events. The doll was already fading from my thoughts as I climbed into bed. Since I grew up in a single-parent household, I shared a room with my mom. She slept on a futon next to mine, her presence always a comfort. I drifted off to sleep without a second thought about the shrine or the doll. In the middle of the night, I woke up to a faint sound. It was my mom's voice, or so I thought, softly calling my name. She was lying with her back to me, and the room was dark, lit only by a sliver of moonlight through the window. "Mom," I mumbled, assuming she was talking to me. But she didn't respond, just kept whispering, "Hey, hey, hey," in a low, eerie tone. The sound sent a chill through me. It didn't feel like her usual voice. It was too soft, too strange. "Mom, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice trembling. I reached out and gently shook her shoulder. She let out a groggy moan, like someone stirring from sleep, and slowly turned toward me. Her face looked normal at first, sleepy and familiar. I relaxed a little, thinking she must have been talking in her sleep. But then out of nowhere, a sickening crack echoed through the room, like something heavy slamming into her face. My heart stopped as her face caved in, just like the doll's had at the shrine. Her features collapsed, leaving a dark, hollow void where her face should have been. I stared, paralyzed with terror, as a strange voice slithered out from the black hole. "How about this?" it said, cold and mocking. I didn't have time to process it. Fear overwhelmed me, and I passed out, my mind shutting down from sheer panic. When I opened my eyes the next morning, everything seemed normal. My mom was already up, bustling around in the kitchen making breakfast, her face perfectly fine. I was shaken but relieved, wondering if it had all been a nightmare. Looking back, I still don't know if what I experienced that night was a dream or something more. All I could think was that the doll was angry with me for what I'd done. It felt like a warning, a punishment for my reckless act at the shrine. Thankfully, my mom was unharmed, and no curse seemed to follow me. But that experience changed me. I stopped being so mischievous, my days of showing off long gone. The memory of that doll and that night stuck with me, vivid and unsettling, a reminder to never disrespect something I didn't fully understand. When I was about 7 or 8, just before starting first grade, my family moved to a new city. It was a tough transition for me. I didn't know anyone, and as a shy kid, I spent most of my time at home, doodling or playing by myself. My mom would occasionally take me to a nearby park to play with other kids, but those were fleeting encounters. Most of the children I met there were just passing faces, not friends I'd see again. So I stayed cooped up in the house, feeling lonely and bored. That summer, right around the halfway mark, my birthday rolled around. My aunt, who had just started her first job and was probably scraping by, sent me a doll as a gift. When I opened the package, I noticed it looked a bit worn, not shiny and new like the toys in stores. Looking back, I realized she might have bought it secondhand, maybe from a thrift shop to save money. I later found out the doll was from a line discontinued years before I received it. Still, as a kid, I was thrilled to have something new to play with. I named the doll Little Tree, a whimsical name that felt right to me. For the first week or so, I was obsessed with it. I carried Little Tree everywhere, through the house to the dinner table, even setting it beside me while I ate. It was like having a friend, something to fill the quiet of my lonely days. But after about a week, I started noticing something strange. Whenever I played rough with Little Tree, twisting its arm in a full circle, bending its legs backward from the waist, or turning its head too far, I'd hear a faint voice whisper, "That hurts." As a kid, I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination. Kids hear things, right? I convinced myself it was all in my head and kept playing, ignoring the odd little voice. This went on for a while. The whispers happened often, always when I was rough with the doll, but I told myself it was nothing. Toward the end of summer, my mom started taking me to the park more regularly. There, I met a girl named Tomoko who was 2 years older than me. She lived just around the corner from our house, at the end of our alley, and we hit it off right away. Tomoko became my first real friend in the new city, my childhood companion. One day, I invited her to come over and play, and she eagerly agreed. The next day, she showed up at my house, and we headed to my parents' room on the second floor to play house. I was the dad, Tomoko was the mom, and Little Tree was our child. We got really into it, setting up an imaginary home and acting out silly family scenarios. After a while, my mom called us downstairs for snacks. We were so caught up in our game that we didn't want to stop, so Tomoko came up with a playful excuse to pause. Little Tree was naughty and bullied the neighbor's kid, she said, so we have to punish them by locking them in a box to think about what they did. I thought it was a fun idea, so we grabbed a small storage box from the closet in my parents' room, tucked Little Tree inside, and closed the lid. Then we ran downstairs to eat snacks. After that, we got distracted watching cartoons in the living room, laughing and forgetting all about the game. Time slipped away, and soon it was getting late. Tomoko had to go home, and we both completely forgot about Little Tree, still tucked away in the box. That night, my mom sent me to bed early. I trudged up to my room on the second floor, turned off the light, and crawled into bed. As I lay there, ready to close my eyes, I glanced around the room one last time. My heart skipped a beat. There, on the edge of my desk, sat Little Tree, facing me, its glassy eyes seeming to stare right into mine. I froze. I always kept the doll on a shelf by my bed, not on the desk. And then it hit me. Hadn't Tomoko and I locked it in the box in my parents' room? My stomach churned with fear. I leapt out of bed and raced downstairs, my bare feet slapping against the floor. I found my parents in the living room and blurted out, "Did you take Little Tree out of the box?" They looked confused and said they had no idea what I was talking about. They didn't even know the doll was in a box in their room. I explained what had happened, how Tomoko and I had put Little Tree in the closet as part of our game. My parents just chuckled, brushing it off as a kid's wild imagination. But I was too scared to go back to my room alone. Seeing my distress, my dad sighed and said, "All right, let's go check." I followed him upstairs, clinging to his shadow as we entered my room. He flicked on the light, and to my confusion, the desk was empty. No doll. Dad shook his head, probably thinking I was making it all up. "You probably just forgot it was in the box and felt guilty," he said. "Let's go get it." We headed to my parents' room. As we approached the closet, I heard it again, that faint muttering voice I'd heard before when playing with Little Tree. It was coming from inside the closet, a soft, plaintive whisper saying, "It's so dark." My blood ran cold. This wasn't my imagination. I grabbed my dad's arm, trembling, and hid behind him. He stopped, his face tensing. He'd heard it too. We crept toward the closet, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Dad reached for the sliding door and yanked it open with a quick, forceful tug. The moment he did, Little Tree tumbled out from the top shelf, smacking him square in the face. He let out a startled yelp, flailing his arms and stumbling back a few steps. I couldn't help but find his reaction a little funny, but the sight of the doll falling from a shelf I couldn't even reach was terrifying. How had it gotten up there? I was too short to place it so high, and we definitely left it in the box. Dad, looking unsettled, picked up the doll and examined it. "You shouldn't play with this anymore," he said firmly. "We'll get you a new one." He carried little Tree downstairs, and that was the last I ever saw of it. He told me to go to bed, and I did, still shaken but too exhausted to argue. Thanks to Tomoko, I soon made more friends and started settling into life in the new city. The memory of Little Tree faded as I filled my days with playdates and school. It wasn't until the summer before my second year of middle school that the doll came up again. Tomoko was about to move away for high school, and one evening she came over to hang out. We sat in the living room, eating fruit and watching a summer TV special about cursed objects. One segment featured a haunted doll, and Tomoko turned to me. "Hey, do you remember that doll you had when we were kids?" she asked. It took me a moment, but then I remembered Little Tree. Tomoko leaned in, her voice low. "I never told you this, but that doll always gave me a weird vibe. That day we were playing house when you stepped out to use the bathroom. I was sitting on the floor, facing away from it. I felt something push me from behind hard. When I turned around, Little Tree was right there, facing me, even though I swear it had been on the other side of the room before. She said she wasn't scared, but she'd always thought there was something off about that doll. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I'd known it was strange, but hearing her confirm it made my skin crawl. Just then, my dad walked into the living room with a beer in hand. I asked him what had happened to Little Tree. He took a sip, then said, "I took it to the shrine with a coworker. The priests there said there was something in it, maybe the lingering will of its previous owner. They told us it had to be burned." He described how they placed the doll in a wooden box and set it on a small bonfire while the priest chanted prayers. As the flames consumed the box, it started shaking violently, and a strange guttural roar came from inside. Halfway through, the doll melted and unrecognizable, crawled out of the fire, moving on its own. Dad and his coworker were horrified, but the priests managed to finish the ritual, destroying the doll completely. Tomoko and I stared at each other, barely able to process what he'd said. "Is that for real?" I asked, my voice shaking. Dad nodded solemnly. I saw it with my own eyes. Then he looked at us, his tone serious. "Be careful with old second-hand dolls. You never know what might be attached to them." That night, I lay awake, the memory of Little Tree burning itself back into my mind, a reminder that some things are better left untouched. This happened during my high school years when I was in the thick of my rebellious phase, full of attitude and not caring much about anything. One afternoon, as I walked home from school, I noticed something unusual. The house across the street from ours, which had been empty for years, showed signs of life. The young couple had moved in. As I passed by, the woman, who looked polite and put together, greeted me warmly, introducing herself as the new neighbor. I gave her a half-hearted nod, mumbled something vague, and hurried inside my house. That night, while I was studying, or pretending to study, I glanced out my bedroom window. My room faced one of the windows of the new neighbor's house on the second floor. The curtains were drawn, and the window was shut tight, but the light inside cast a faint glow. Through the curtains, I could make out the silhouette of a young girl standing motionless by the window. I figured the couple must have a daughter. From then on, I started paying attention to that room. Every night, without fail, the window stayed closed, curtains drawn, but I'd see the girl's shadow moving around, sometimes running back and forth, sometimes standing still by the window for hours. It was odd, almost unnerving, how she could stay so still for so long. A creeping unease settled in my chest, though I couldn't pinpoint why. Around that time, I started having strange dreams. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my heart racing. The dreams were always vague, slipping away the moment I opened my eyes, but they were tied to that room across the street. All I could recall was a girl standing in an empty Japanese-style room with tatami mats, her back to me, her body rigid and unmoving. The dreams came almost every night, leaving me exhausted and on edge. I didn't know what they meant, but looking back, I think it was some kind of instinct, a primal warning I couldn't yet understand. One day, as I walked home from school, the old lady next door called out to me. She and her husband were an elderly couple, and she was the nosy type, always gossiping about the neighborhood, poking her nose into everyone's business. I tried to ignore her, pretending I didn't hear, but she wasn't having it. She rushed out of her yard, grabbed my arm, and pulled me close. Her face was a mix of excitement and fear as she whispered, "Listen, kid, stay away from those people across the street. Be careful. I've seen things, secrets about that house, especially that room on the second floor, the one facing your bedroom. Don't go snooping around, wondering who's in there. What's in that room? It's not human." I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. To me, she was just a meddling old woman spinning tales. I brushed her off and went home, thinking she was nuts. If only I'd listened. The next day was a weekend, and my parents were out, leaving me to watch the house. In the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I saw a young woman standing outside. "Who is it?" I called. "I'm from across the street," she replied. I opened the door, and there was the neighbor, all smiles and apologies. She explained she had an urgent errand to run, her husband was away, and she needed someone to watch her daughter for a few hours. "I'll pay you 10,000 yen, she added. That was about $100, a fortune to a high schooler. Without a second thought, I agreed. She seemed relieved, handed me the cash, and led me across the street to her house. As we walked, she told me her daughter's name was Yoshiko. "She's taking a nap upstairs right now," she said. "When she wakes up, just play with her a bit. Feel free to eat anything in the kitchen, and you can watch TV in the living room until she's up." Then she grabbed her bag and hurried out, leaving me alone in their house. The place felt off dim and chilly, with a faint musty smell. I settled on the couch in the living room and flipped on the TV, trying to shake the uneasy vibe. After a while, I heard footsteps upstairs, quick and light, like a child running around. Yoshiko must be awake, I thought. I turned off the TV and headed up to the second floor. At the top of the stairs, I noticed the first room's door was slightly ajar, just a crack. The sound of footsteps came from inside, darting back and forth. As I approached, I caught a glimpse of a small figure flashing past the gap. "Yoshiko," I called out, trying to sound friendly. "Hi, I'm the neighbor from across the street. Your mom asked me to look after you." There was no reply, just silence. Then from inside the room, a little girl's voice spoke, soft but clear. "Big sister, come play with me." I smiled, relieved. "Sure thing," I said, pushing the door open. The moment I stepped inside, a strange feeling hit me. The room was dark, the lights off, and it was unnaturally cold, like stepping into a freezer. A foul stench hung in the air, sharp and nauseating. Near the door, I noticed a pile of rotting food scraps on the floor, half-eaten fruit, moldy bread, and something unidentifiable. That must be the source of the smell, I thought, wrinkling my nose. In the center of the room, by the window, stood a small figure with her back to me, facing the closed curtains. She seemed to be staring out, but the window was shut tight, the heavy curtains blocking any view. The scene felt wrong, like a puzzle with missing pieces. I took a cautious step forward, scanning the room. It looked eerily familiar, like the empty tatami room from my dreams. My unease grew, but I pushed it down. "Hey, Yoshiko," I said gently, "why don't we go downstairs and play?" I reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. Her body felt wrong, hard and rigid, not like human flesh, but like cold, unyielding plastic. A chill shot through me. I gripped her shoulder a bit harder, trying to turn her around. With a sickening snap, her upper body broke off at the waist and crashed to the floor. I stumbled back, gasping, as the figure collapsed into two pieces. It wasn't a girl. It was a mannequin-like doll, human-sized, its surface smooth and lifeless. The upper half lay face up on the floor, revealing a crudely painted face, crooked eyes, a smudged mouth, and scrawled across the forehead in bold characters, the name Yoshiko. My stomach lurched. Sweat beaded on my face, and I felt bile rising in my throat. What the hell was this thing? Panic took over. I turned to run, but as I reached the doorway, a girl's voice sharp with anger, came from behind me. "Didn't you say you'd play with me?" I whipped around, my heart pounding. The room was empty except for the broken doll. The upper half was still on the floor, the lower half standing by the window. But now the lower half had turned, its legs facing me instead of the window. My scalp prickled with fear. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted down the stairs, nearly tripping in my haste. From above, I heard rapid, heavy footsteps chasing after me, thundering toward the staircase. I didn't look back. I sprinted out of the house, bursting onto the street, gasping for air, my hands shaking uncontrollably. As I stood there, trying to catch my breath, the old lady next door spotted me. She was in her yard and called my name, waving me over. I stumbled to her gate, my chest tight, sweat dripping down my face. "What were you doing in that house?" she asked, her voice urgent. "Are you okay?" I couldn't speak, my heart still racing, my mind replaying the doll's painted face. "I told you to be careful," she said, shaking her head. She grabbed a handful of salt, a traditional Japanese way to ward off evil, and sprinkled it over me, muttering something about cleansing bad spirits. "Go home now," she urged. I nodded, still dazed, and slipped the 10,000 yen into the neighbor's mailbox before running back to my house. Once inside, I locked myself in my room and sat at my desk, staring out the window at the house across the street. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in that room. As I watched, the curtains in the second-floor window slowly parted, and the window slid open just a crack. A figure appeared in the gap, the doll's face, with its crooked features and Yoshiko scrawled across it, staring directly at me. I slammed my window shut, yanked the curtains closed, and dove under my blankets, trembling until my parents came home. That night, the doorbell rang. My mom answered it, and I hovered behind her, peeking out. It was the woman from across the street, smiling brightly, holding a small gift box. "This is a little thank you for watching our daughter," she said cheerfully. I stared at her, unable to speak, my mind screaming that there was no daughter. She caught my eye and gave me a warm smile, thanking me again. I mumbled something polite and fled back to my room. From my window, I watched her walk back to her house. Just before she stepped inside, she turned, looked up at my window, and met my gaze. Her smile vanished. She raised a finger to her lips in a sharp, silent command, "Don't say a word." Then she disappeared inside. I never told my parents. I was too scared that the woman was unhinged, that she might curse my family, or that the thing in that room would come for us. I avoided the neighbors after that, crossing the street to dodge them, my fear outweighing any curiosity. Even as an adult, after I'd moved out, the memory haunted me. A while back, I visited my parents with my kids, staying for a couple of days. One night, as I tidied my old room, I opened the curtains and glanced across the street. The window was still shut, the curtains drawn, but there was the silhouette of a girl, standing as always. It had to be Yoshiko, or whatever that thing was. What chilled me to the bone was this. The figure was waving at me. Slow, deliberate waves, as if it knew I was back, knew I was watching. In my mind, I could almost hear it whispering, "Big sister, come play with me." I slammed the curtains shut, my heart pounding, and vowed never to look at that window again. As a child, I was never particularly fond of dolls. While my peers were enchanted by golden-haired princesses or adorable baby dolls, my heart belonged to colorful comic books and outdoor games that filled my days with adventure. That all changed, however, when I turned 10. That year, my grandmother, a refined and traditional woman with an air of timeless elegance, gave me an unforgettable birthday gift, a Japanese doll. The doll had glossy black hair neatly braided, eyes as dark and lustrous as longan seeds, and wore an exquisite kimono adorned with delicate cherry blossom patterns. My grandmother told me it was called Sakura Hime, or Cherry Blossom Princess, a keepsake from her trip to Kyoto many years ago. I wasn't sure why she chose such a gift for a tomboy like me who had little interest in dolls, but because it was from her, I cherished it. I placed Sakura Hime on the small cabinet by my bed, where I could see her each morning when I woke. At first, I paid little attention to Sakura Hime's presence. She was merely a decoration, a token of my grandmother's love. But as time passed, I began to notice strange occurrences. Every night before bed, I made sure Sakura Hime was positioned neatly, her face turned toward me. Yet each morning, as sunlight slipped through the window blinds, I found her facing the wall as if avoiding my gaze. I told myself I must have shifted her accidentally while tossing and turning in my sleep, or perhaps I'd simply forgotten her original position. These incidents grew more frequent. Not only would Sakura Haim turn to face the wall, but sometimes she appeared in entirely different spots in my room, sitting on my study chair, or even lying on the spare pillow at the foot of my bed. Once, I was certain I'd locked my bedroom door tightly before going to sleep, but the next morning, it was slightly ajar. There, at the threshold, sat Sakura Haim, her jet black eyes staring into the shadowy hallway beyond. A creeping fear began to take root in my mind. I started to suspect that Sakura Haim was more than just an inanimate object. It felt as though she had a consciousness, and worse, that she was watching me. Whether I was doing homework, playing, or even changing clothes, I couldn't shake the sensation of invisible eyes following my every move. Gradually, I grew uneasy with Sakura Haim in my room. I tried to hide her, turning her face to the wall, covering her with a blanket, and once I even stashed her in my wardrobe. But no matter what I did, she always reappeared in her original spot or some other inexplicable place. My fear reached its peak one night when I woke up thirsty. The room was shrouded in darkness, with only the faint glow of streetlights filtering through the window. I glanced at the bedside cabinet, and my heart stopped. Sakura Haim was gone. Instead, she stood by the full-length mirror my mother had recently bought, placed in the corner of my room. What terrified me most was that she was facing the mirror, and through its reflection, I could see her face staring directly at me. Her dark eyes seemed to glint in the shadows. Cold sweat prickled my back, and I squeezed my eyes shut, desperately convincing myself it was just a dream. The next morning, I recounted the incident to my mother. A practical woman, she laughed it off, saying I was at an age where my imagination ran wild with dreams. Still, she agreed to help me move Sakura Haim to the basement, where we stored old, seldom used items. I felt an immense wave of relief. Believing the ordeal was over, I went to school that day with a lighter heart. But when I returned home that afternoon, a faint scent of cherry blossoms filled the house. A chill ran down my spine. Stepping into the living room, I found my mother sitting on the sofa, her face pale. She pointed toward the full-length mirror in the corner. What I saw next sent a surge of terror through me. A large crack ran from the top to the bottom of the mirror, distorting the reflection of a small girl with dark, piercing eyes. Strangely, the crack didn't seem to be on the mirror's surface, but embedded deep within the glass itself. And there, at the base of the mirror, sat Sakura Haim, her head tilted to one side as if studying her own fractured reflection. My mother explained that after I left for school, she had gone to the basement to retrieve some items. She confirmed Sakura Haim was still in her box. But when she returned upstairs, she found the mirror inexplicably cracked, and the faint scent of cherry blossoms lingered in the air. She tried cleaning the mirror, but the crack remained, as did the image of the girl trapped within it, like a permanent imprint. My father took the mirror to be repaired, but no craftsman in Tokyo could explain the bizarre crack or the girl's image. In the end, we had no choice but to discard it. As for Sakura Haim, my father decided to take her to an ancient temple near our home for a purification ritual. The temple's head monk, an elderly man with snow-white hair and beard, said the doll carried a stubborn spirit bound by an ancient curse. He performed an elaborate ceremony to release it, but admitted he wasn't certain if it had been entirely successful. Yet the story didn't end there. After the mirror cracked, I began noticing strange reflections in any reflective surface, shop windows in Ginza, my phone screen, even puddles on the street. Each time I saw the faint image of a small girl with dark eyes staring at me. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I heard a faint, tinkling laugh, like wind chimes in the empty alleys at night. Even now, as an adult with a family of my own in Shibuya, I can't linger in front of mirrors for long. Passing by shops selling traditional Japanese dolls fills me with an icy dread, and I quicken my pace. Sakura Haim and the cracked mirror have become a haunting memory, a constant reminder of the mysterious and terrifying things in this world that defy explanation. Sometimes, I wonder if Sakura Haim truly meant me harm, or if she was simply trying to communicate, perhaps warning me of something I couldn't comprehend. And the girl in the mirror, was she Sakura Haim's spirit, or another entity bound to her? I have no answers, and perhaps it's better not to seek them. My name is Kenji, and this story happened when I was a high school student living in the suburbs of Tokyo, where old wooden houses stood side by side with modern apartment buildings. I was a shy, quiet kid who spent most of my time in the school library or playing video games at home. My mother, a meticulous woman, was deeply spiritual and often visited shrines and temples to pray for our family's safety and well-being. On my 15th birthday, my mother gave me a special gift, a small Daruma doll. Unlike the typical bright red, round Daruma dolls commonly seen in Japan, symbols of perseverance and good luck, this one was a deep blue, with one eye already painted on its face. My mother explained, "This is a guardian Daruma, Kenji. It was blessed by a monk at Fushimi Inari Taisha, a famous shrine in Kyoto known for its thousands of red torii gates. Paint the other eye when you achieve something truly important." I wasn't particularly excited about it, but since it was a gift from my mother, I placed it on my study desk. The Daruma sat silently on my desk, its single-painted eye staring blankly. I didn't have any grand goals to justify painting the other eye. My high school life passed quietly, except for one small problem. I was being bullied by Akari, a girl in my class. Akari was strong-willed, outspoken, and sometimes a bit rough around the edges. For some reason, she took a particular interest in teasing me. It started with snide remarks, but soon escalated to hiding my books, spilling water into my pencil case, or even shoving me in a hallway. I was scared of Akari, but too afraid to tell anyone, including my mother. One evening, while I was doing homework, I heard a faint noise from my desk. I looked up, and my heart skipped a beat. The blue Daruma had been knocked over, lying face down. Even stranger, a small crack had appeared right across its face, just below the painted eye. I was certain I hadn't dropped it. My mother was meticulous and never touched my things. Feeling uneasy, I set the Daruma upright again. The next day at school, something odd happened. During gym class, Akari tripped while running and twisted her ankle. She had to miss school for a few days. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but deep down, I was relieved to have a break from her torment. That relief, however, was short-lived. When I got home, I noticed the Daruma on my desk had shifted, turned at an angle. The crack on its face seemed to have grown slightly longer. A chill ran through me. Could it have something to do with Akari? In the days that followed, things grew even more unsettling. Whenever Akari caused trouble for someone at school, or I heard about her misdeeds, I'd come home to find the Daruma slightly altered. It would move to a different spot on my desk, or the crack on its face would extend just a bit further. I began to believe the Daruma had some mysterious connection to Akari, as if it were punishing her for her bad behavior. The thought both terrified me and gave me a strange sense of power. One sleepless night, I stared at the Daruma on my desk. The crack had spread significantly, and from it, I could feel a faint, cold draft. Suddenly, I heard a soft knock at my door. It was my mother. She stepped into my room, her face etched with worry. "Kenji, are you okay? I just had a strange dream. I saw your Daruma crying, and a young girl was in danger." I told her about the strange occurrences with the Daruma and the eerie coincidences with Akari's accidents. My mother's face paled. She picked up the Daruma, examining it closely. This crack and the unpainted eye. "This isn't a good sign, Kenji. Daruma dolls are symbols of perseverance, but if they're damaged before their goal is fulfilled, they can become vessels for resentment." The next morning, my mother took me to a small temple on the outskirts of town where an elderly, wise monk resided. After hearing our story, the monk studied the Daruma with a grave expression. "This Daruma was crafted to protect," he said. "But when it senses injustice or harm directed at its owner, it absorbs that negative energy. The crack isn't a bad omen for others, it's a warning for the one who possesses it. It's taking in the resentment meant to protect you." The monk explained that the Daruma was trying to shield me from Akari's bullying by channeling negative thoughts into misfortune for her. But in doing so, it was damaging itself and storing that resentment within. If I allowed it to continue protecting me this way, I would eventually bear the consequences. "You must break this cycle," the monk said. "Face your problem yourself and complete the Daruma's purpose." I returned home with a heavy heart, knowing what I had to do. The next day at school, I gathered my courage. When Akari tried to tease me again, I took a deep breath and said, "Akari, stop it. I don't want you to do this anymore." She froze, caught off guard by my defiance. For a moment, I saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes. From that day on, Akari stopped bullying me. We never became close friends, but the harassment ended. When I got home, I looked at the Daruma on my desk. The crack was still there, but I felt an odd sense of relief. I picked up a calligraphy brush, took a deep breath, and painted the second eye. As I finished, a faint blue light shimmered around the Daruma for a moment, and a warm sensation radiated from it. The crack on its face seemed to shrink slightly, and the cold draft was gone. From that day forward, the Daruma stopped moving on its own, and no new cracks appeared. It remained quietly on my desk, its two eyes now complete. I was no longer afraid of Akari, and I learned that sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to face it head-on, rather than relying on supernatural forces. The experience left a lasting mark on me. Sometimes, when I look at the blue Daruma with its faint crack, I'm reminded of those days. I don't know if it was truly a vessel for resentment or just a strange coincidence, but it taught me an invaluable lesson about courage and responsibility. My name is Okiku, and my life was once peaceful in a quiet corner of suburban Kyoto. My husband worked long hours, leaving me at home to care for our only daughter, Haruna. Haruna was a lively, curious girl who loved exploring and often brought home odd treasures she found on her way back from school. I'd chuckle at her prizes, a heart-shaped stone, a vibrant red maple leaf, or sometimes a gnarled, dry twig. But one day, Haruna brought home something I never wanted to see. It was a doll, not the cute, fluffy-haired dolls and frilly dresses I'd buy for her, but something repulsive. Its hair was matted and tangled, as if it had never been brushed. Its plastic face was grimy, with one eye missing, leaving a dark, hollow socket. Its fingers were broken and bent at unnatural angles, and it wore no clothes, just a filthy, naked frame. "Mommy, I found it at the dump near school," Haruna exclaimed, clutching the doll tightly, her face beaming with excitement. I shuddered. "Haruna, throw it away right now. It's dirty and could have germs from the dump." I tried to stay calm, but inside, I was filled with revulsion. I couldn't understand how she could touch such a thing, let alone hold it so close. Haruna frowned, her big, round eyes glistening with tears. "No way. I love it." She hugged the doll even tighter, refusing to let go. I knew how stubborn she could be, so I relented. "All right, but you have to clean it thoroughly, and we'll find some clothes for it, okay?" I thought if she had to wash it herself, she'd find it disgusting and give up. But no, Haruna happily scampered to the bathroom, and I heard the sound of running water. That night, after Haruna was fast asleep, I crept into her room. The repulsive doll was neatly placed on her pillow, right beside her head, cleaned in a half-hearted way. I couldn't stand it anymore. Seeing it so close to my daughter filled me with an inexplicable dread. I gently picked up the doll. It was heavier than I expected, and under the dim glow of her nightlight, its face still looked ghastly despite the cursory cleaning. I wrapped it in a black plastic bag and quietly went downstairs, tossing it into the outdoor trash bin. I let out a sigh of relief. That disgusting thing was finally out of our home. The next morning, Haruna woke up and immediately searched for her doll. "Mommy, where's my doll?" she asked, her face frantic. I played innocent. "What doll, sweetie? Did you get a new one?" Haruna stared at me, her usual innocent eyes replaced with a strange mix of anger and resentment. "You hid it, didn't you? You hated it, so you threw it away." Her voice rose to a shrill pitch, and she began to wail, collapsing onto the floor, thrashing like an abandoned child. I had never seen Haruna react so intensely. She usually whined a bit and moved on, but this time her sobs were relentless, her eyes glaring at me as if I were her enemy. I tried to comfort her, to hold her, but she pushed me away, screaming and flailing. In the end, I had to let her cry herself to exhaustion until she fell asleep. From that day on, Haruna changed. She was no longer the energetic, cheerful girl I knew. She became withdrawn, barely speaking, often sitting alone in her room, staring into nothingness. Her eyes were vacant, and sometimes I caught her looking at me with a cold, distant expression that reminded me of the doll's eerie gaze. At night, Haruna would wake up in the middle of the night. I'd hear her moving around in her room, followed by the clatter of toys being shifted. When I checked on her, she'd be lying still in bed, eyes closed, seemingly fast asleep. But every morning, I'd find her toys, especially the cute dolls I'd bought her, arranged in bizarre, unsettling patterns. Their heads were tilted at odd angles, or their limbs twisted unnaturally, just like that broken doll. One night, I heard noises from Haruna's room again. I quietly opened the door, and what I saw froze the blood in my veins. Haruna was sitting in the middle of her room, her back to me. She was holding one of the princess dolls I'd bought her, with its golden hair and sparkling dress. But she wasn't playing with it. She was yanking out its hair, strand by strand, and cutting its beautiful dress to shreds with scissors. She giggled, a cold, unnatural laugh that didn't sound like Haruna at all. Then she took a marker and scribbled over the doll's face, turning it into a grotesque caricature. One eye blackened like the empty socket of the discarded doll. I stepped back, covering my mouth to stifle a scream. This wasn't my Haruna. Something had changed her. A wave of terror washed over me, mingled with a deep sadness. My daughter. Something had taken hold of her. I decided to seek help. I told my mother everything, knowing she'd always believed in the spiritual world. Her face grew grave as she listened. Okiku, you threw it away, but Haruna had already bonded with it. It might have absorbed a wandering spirit from the dump. She insisted we take Haruna to see a renowned Onmyoji, a traditional Japanese spiritual practitioner akin to an exorcist in the outskirts of Kyoto. The Onmyoji was an elderly man with white hair and a beard, dressed in traditional robes. When we brought Haruna to him, he studied her intently for a moment before shaking his head. This is unfortunate. The spirit in that doll wasn't just a wandering soul. It's a tsukamagami, a spirit formed in an object that has existed for so long it absorbed enough resentment and negative energy from those who discarded it to gain consciousness. He explained that the doll had sensed Haruna's affection, and when I threw it away, it felt betrayed. In response, it had latched onto Haruna, using her as a vessel to exact revenge on me for discarding it. It doesn't just want to punish you, he said. It wants to replace your daughter. Haruna was still there, but the doll's spirit was controlling her body. I was horrified. Is there any way to save her? I asked, my voice trembling. The Onmyoji paused, deep in thought. There is a way, but it's dangerous. We must draw the spirit out of Haruna and seal it away. It will resist fiercely, and if we fail, Haruna could be permanently harmed or worse. He prepared an elaborate ritual in an empty room. At its center stood a large, upright mirror, surrounded by talismans inscribed with sacred symbols placed on the floor. The Johanna instructed me to bring Haruna into the circle of talismans. Haruna was silent, her eyes vacant. As we positioned her, the Onmyoji began chanting, his voice echoing through the room. Suddenly, Haruna began to thrash violently, her body contorting unnaturally as if something were trying to break free. She let out guttural, inhuman growls, her face twisting into a terrifying grimace. The Onmyoji continued chanting, sweat pouring down his face. Haruna's eyes locked onto the mirror. In its reflection, I saw a faint, ghostly image slowly taking form, the broken doll, with its missing eye and grotesque smile. It was crawling out of Haruna's body, a shadowy figure moving toward the mirror. As the spirit nearly fully emerged, Haruna suddenly went limp, collapsing to the floor. At that moment, the spirit in the mirror let out a piercing scream. The Onmyoji swiftly threw a talisman onto the mirror's surface. The talisman glowed brightly, and the doll's image vanished, leaving behind a deep crack in the glass. Haruna was herself again. She looked around, confused, then burst into tears and clung to me. But I knew things would never be the same. The Onmyoji sealed the doll's spirit within the mirror and buried it in a secret location within the temple grounds, ensuring it could never harm anyone again. He said Haruna was healed, but some of her memories of those days might be blurred or replaced by vague nightmares. Haruna was still my Haruna, but I noticed a subtle change in her eyes. Sometimes, when she smiled, I saw a fleeting coldness, a trace of the doll's eerie gaze. Whenever she brought home a new treasure from the street, my heart raced with fear. I never dared throw away anything she loved again. That fear haunts me every day, whenever I see a doll or any discarded, worn-out object. I'm not certain the doll's spirit was fully sealed away, or if it's still lurking somewhere, waiting for a chance to return, to punish me for throwing it into the trash. Sometimes, I wonder if the doll's spirit still whispers to Haruna in her dreams, reminding her of an old friend who might one day come back.